Hello and welcome everyone to this panel on investing in purpose-driven businesses. I'm Kaja, avid impact investing doctoral researcher and co-founder of the Nordic Impact Investing Network. And today we will be talking about the combination of profit and purpose. We will look into how you can approach purpose-driven investments and how to scale a purpose-driven company. We'll also discuss how a sustainable business model and investment approach can help build resilience in uncertain times like these. And we'll talk about overcoming obstacles to investing in both profit and purpose. So to talk about this, I have two very impressive people with me. Lucas, co-founder and CEO of Hedvig, and Vishal, co-founder and managing director of Obvious Ventures. Welcome. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for kind introduction.
It's great. And to start, I would love to hear more about your companies and your purpose. So if we start with you, Vishal, could you tell us a bit about Obvious Ventures and your approach to investing in purpose-driven businesses?
Yes, thanks very much for inviting me today. So Obvious is most known in the Valley for incubating companies like Twitter and Medium. That's the roots of Obvious. And 7 years ago, we started an institutional fund with a shared belief that mission-driven businesses or purpose-driven businesses reimagining trillion-dollar sectors in ways that is moving the world forward. In positive ways, it's moving the world forward. Those kind of companies are going to outperform their peers. Around that idea, we invest in three large pillars. Pillar number one is sustainable systems, which is reimagining resource-intensive industries. So we are investing or thinking about ideas such as future of manufacturing and supply chain, future of mobility, future of cities. As an example, one of our companies is building 6, 7, 8 carat diamonds in a plasma reactor as a way to get rid of mining. Second pillar for us is healthy living, where we're asking questions like future of food, what is future of food, what is future of care? As an example, one of our companies is Beyond Meat, which went public last year. It's reimagining animal-based proteins with plant-based proteins. Third area is what we call people power. Where we are thinking about things like future of work, future of money, and future of learning. As an example, in future of money, we are a proud investors of Hedvig, and also one of our companies just yesterday announced, it's a company called LTSC, just announced a new stock exchange around this whole idea of bringing long-termism into the public markets. So in general, what the reason why Obvious exists is supporting purpose-driven, mission-driven businesses, building a better world. And currently we have 3 funds. And most of the time, 70–80% of the time, we get involved in very early stages of the companies.
Thank you. And Lucas, Hedvig is one of these companies that is reimagining a trillion-dollar industry as Obvious Ventures. Yes. Could you tell us a bit about your company and your mission?
Sure, would love to. So before I founded Hedvig, I was working as a management consultant, and I was helping some of the big insurance companies to operate more efficiently. And I noticed when I was working with these insurers that they actually make their products intentionally painful for people to use. Because the way some of these companies make money is by taking premiums to cover risks and then applying strategies to pay back as little as possible. And that made me quite frustrated as I think insurance is such an important industry that are tasked with helping us get back on our feet when some dramatic and bad event happens in our life. So me and my co-founders, Fredrik and John, we founded Hedvig and with the sort of simple idea of if you start from a blank sheet of paper, is it possible to create an insurance experience that is 10 times better than what the incumbents are offering, and that really helps people in a way that makes people feel sort of invincible because they have the access to this great help service. So that's the simple idea we set out to do. And we realized early on that sort of the most important thing is to have sort of sound fundamentals when setting out on this journey. And one of the most important thing was to sort of how can we redesign the business model of insurance so that we don't have these strange incentives that regular insurance companies have. Because we don't want to make money by reducing the amount of money that we pay out. We want to make money when we create a great service for people. So we ended up changing the business model. So the way it works is that when people pay their premiums for their insurance, we only retain sort of a flat percentage of that to cover the cost for the service. The rest, the majority we allocate to claims payments. And then we pay out money for the claims over the course of the year. And if there's money left over, we donate that to charities instead of taking it ourselves. And the implication of that is, first of all, we make a contribution, but second of all, we don't have an incentive to not to pay out. So the only thing we're focused on is creating the best possible experience. And that's what we've been working very hard on for the last couple of years.
Great. And you mentioned there that your way in there was one of you saw a problem or approach to in an industry that you didn't necessarily appreciate. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think that that can happen in industries where some of the big players maybe have too comfortable of a situation and get lots of power. And that can make you lazy, and I think in some of those cases, new companies need to come in and show how this product can actually look like if you focus on the consumer and give them what they deserve, essentially.
Interesting. And similarly, Vishal, what led you to go into positive, like investment into positive purpose and positive impact businesses?
Yeah, so the cornerstone of my career was helping build Patagonia, which is an outdoor lifestyle brand here based in the US. I came into that company pretty early start of my career as a diehard capitalist, and after 10 years of working there, I left there as a refined capitalist, like thinking about much bigger, like how does kind of business fit in the context of society, and answering much bigger questions. And the company left a huge mark on me on how do you build a great product, have amazing culture, be very mindful of society and planet, but at the same time run a very tight and profitable business. And so in my mind, given it was a transformative experience pretty early on in my career, that was the de facto, like, hey, this is how business should be run, and there's no conflict between doing the right thing and building a long-term business. And with this kind of experience, I set out my career after I left Patagonia to see if I could build in my career, like be part of multiples of Patagonias. And that took me to the world of investing. I worked with a firm started by Steve Case at a firm called Revolution. Was involved in companies like Zipcar, which was transforming transportation industry, and then was investing in emerging markets with kind of this view of building better models for kind of bottom of the pyramid. And then moved back to the US and partnered with Ev and James to start Obvious. And our kind of hypothesis is a little different. We don't call ourselves as an impact investor. We believe that venture is the highest risk capital you can get, and it should be directed towards solving kind of the biggest problems which exist in the world, and reimagining those, and backing entrepreneurs like Lucas who are thinking of like, hey, this doesn't feel right. This insurance industry doesn't feel right the way it is set up. Progress always happens by somebody challenging the way things are done. And given venture in the world of investing is a progress-driven industry of what comes next, I think so. We said like, hey, we are exclusively going to focus on things which build a better industry, a better world.
Yeah, that's great. And so, what's the story? How did the two of you meet, and how did you decide to or choose to team up?
Yeah, so I think the first time we met was probably back in 2018 when I was a keynote speaker at the Brilliant Minds conference. I was telling the story about Hedvig, and on that conference I met one of Vishal's colleagues, Andre, and I think we both felt when we talked after the presentation that sort of the way we were looking at things at Hedvig and the way and our purpose was very much aligned with the way obvious things about building businesses. And I think at that point we had just raised a round of capital, but we stayed in contact, and a year later it was time to partner up. And I think what we were looking for at that point was, I mean, apart from a very a fund with good track record, a very reputable fund, we were also looking for a partner that shared the same values and the same approach that we could partner up with for a long time. Because I think you're kind of stuck with your investors for a big chunk of your life to come, and you should find partners that you really can see yourself working with for a long time. So yeah.
Yeah, and so
and Vishal came to Stockholm. You had your first Sweden trip.
Yes, I did. So I think like I remember like as if it was the other day. Like I think Andre said like, hey, this company is very interesting, and so I started having conversations, and I was of course hesitant because it's like the company is far away, and like and we get involved in early stages, and how do you kind of partner with the team, and so but whenever I would have my Zoom calls, and I was impressed by what they were building, and the intent behind the company, and the team that they were committed to kind of building the business for the long term, and so then the team from Hedvig came to San Francisco. We met in person, and got further excited, and my one rule is to kind of go and meet the team as well, and spend some time. And so I flew to Sweden and I spent some time with the team there, and what I was really impressed was I felt like they were pursuing quality from day one, and I felt they were thinking about things like culture and hiring the right people, but at the same time making hard choices early on in their existence. And given like this is for other entrepreneurs, I think like for us, when we get involved in very early stages of the company, you don't have huge amount of metrics. There are some metrics, but ultimately you are backing people and their choices, and how what they stand for, and what are the kind of choices they're going to make once you get involved. And so I felt really good after our visit in Sweden, like that I want to be part of this ride and help Hedvig make an impact in Europe and broader and kind of globally thereafter.
And since then, and also before, Lucas, Hedvig has grown very quickly. Like, could you how's the growth been, and what are has there been some challenges when you've been scaling the business and raising capital, or how's it been?
Yeah, there have been tons of challenges, but I think the way we've looked at it from all the way from the start is that there are kind of two phases to our journey, and where the first one is very product focused, creating this experience that we envisioned from the get-go. And that's what we've been working hard on up until this point. And it's been challenging because there are no right answers, and we have very high ambitions on sort of winning on customer experience, which is hard. But by now we actually have an NPS scores that are roughly 10x what the industry has. So and we can really sort of feel that, and when we look at the business today, and then our phase 2 would be scaling this offering and this service to as many people as possible, and that's the phase we're going into now. We launched in Norway for a couple of months ago, and now we're kind of working on scaling to larger markets across Europe. And I think the biggest challenge there has been that we're sort of dependent on some external partners when we go into new markets. And those partners are bought into the vision, but not to 100%, not as much as Vishal, for instance. So that creates a little bit of tension. They want us to compromise a little bit, and we don't want to compromise. So the big step we're taking now is actually to become a regulated insurance carrier. And that's a very big step. It's like almost like becoming a bank of your own. But that will enable us to grow autonomously, so we can select how fast we want to expand ourselves and not be as dependent on external partners. So I think maybe coming back to the part about when you're building a purpose-driven business, I think an advice of mine is to really make sure that all your partners, all your employees and your investors are sort of fully bought in, because you need this sort of jolt of energy striking towards the same direction. Then it can be very powerful, but if that's not the case, then it adds more friction, and you will need to compromise, of course, but be wary of the cost of that, I think, is an advice of mine.
Yeah, and let me kind of just add in. I think Lucas and the team has been kind of doing an exceptional job. It's a very complicated business. It's a regulated business. You have to kind of do the right thing by the consumers. You have to underwrite well, because it's an insurance company, and you have to have strong technology, kind of both on the front end and the back end side. You have to work with reinsurance and other partners on the back side who are helping you with your balance sheet. Then as they are thinking about or they're working towards becoming your own kind of full stack insurance, there is like much more complexities around that. And then you have to think about the nuances of each market, and how do you kind of build a playbook to kind of scale in that market, and how do you price it? You don't want to price it really low or really high. How do you build the right kind of a book and a strategy? So I think, but if you have a great culture and if you have a great kind of mission orientation, and I think then you are able to kind of see through all this ups and downs of saying like, hey, that's the North Star. That's where we are headed, and so that's kind of the exciting part of the journey. There's always going to be challenges, but like if you have a clear North Star, I think it kind of makes it fun.
Right. Yeah. And I think, and you wrote a really interesting piece on this, Hedvig, or like a great read on that mentioned how important trust is, both like internal in the company, but also building it with customers. Has this been like, and it seems it could have been important in also building the resilience of Hedvig itself.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think maybe to explain a little bit of I think the best way to explain that our approach when it comes to trust is maybe with a simple example. So let's say that you just started to work with a new colleague that you've got to know over the last month or so, and that colleague suddenly shows up and give you his or her keys to the apartment and says, I've just moved in. I want a friend to hold on to a spare set of keys so that I can get in if I lose my own keys. If that would happen to me, I would feel very much entrusted by that person, and would like to sort of reciprocate with sort of a great sense of responsibility, but also gratefulness. It would probably build our relationship stronger. And we think the same way about our members. So we think that if we trust our members, if we choose to sort of believe in their stories when they report a claim, what we will get back is a lot of gratefulness and a sense of responsibility that you've been entrusted. And that's something we've been daring to do, and I think that's a big reason why we get these nice scores from our members, that they feel entrusted. We also use the same approach internally, so that's our approach to trust. It's a little bit risky, but I think we've managed to show now that it's working, that it's making business sense as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That in a nutshell.
Yeah. So now that we're closing into the final question. So like if we go a bit broad and looking at some of the current obstacles to investors going into investing in purpose-driven businesses, I think it seems like there is a current slight misconception by some that you have to choose between profit and impact when building a company and investing. And so from either one of you, like what do you think are the obstacles for investors to go into positive impact investments, or do we just need more examples like Hedvig, for example?
Yeah, so I think like the premise. The premise, I have an issue with the premise is, and I'll tell you why. I think like if you look at last 100 years, I think there's like business has a role, politics has a role, right? Like, and nonprofits have a role, and in business, if you think about last 100 years, right? Like there's been a lot of innovations which have made quality of life better, and there were kind of companies which got started, which with an intent of saying like, hey, let us kind of, this is a problem and let's kind of solve that problem. If you look at today's world, and if there are entrepreneurs like Lucas and others who are saying like, hey, what are the biggest problems, right? Like, and in case of Lucas, he through McKinsey gets to understand kind of the dysfunctionalities of the current insurance industry. Somebody else gets excited about like, hey, why is when type 2 diabetes could be reversed, why are people just kind of making money by selling pills, right? Like, or somebody else kind of says like, hey, why is kind of industry built or public markets built in a way that like all the incentives are short-term oriented versus like we know institutions get built in long terms, right? Like, or somebody says like, hey, if the world population is going to go 10x more, and there's not enough animals to feed, like why don't you work on plant-based proteins? And proteins are important aspects of of your life. Or like, people question like, hey, why does a company in the US design a pen? The pen then goes to be built in China. In China kind of sends back the pen to a warehouse in the US, and then the same pen goes back to China to be sold the Chinese market as well, right? Like that doesn't make sense, right? Like from a resource perspective, and of course from a climate perspective. So and then I'm living, I feel, in the ground zero right now. Like there is pandemic, there is fires, there's like all this kind of negative stuff which we have experienced here in the Bay Area, and so there's a lot of value destruction which is happening, right? Like if you just think from a capitalistic point of view, even, but how do you then have better kind of models to predict for both politicians as well as businesses to deal with it, to create more resiliency, right? Like and hopefully better models that we can solve for climate change, right? Like or kind of make a dent or slow down, right? So I think, like, to me, I in my mind there is no conflict per se, right? Like I think, like if you think about from that narrative, but I understand people struggle with it. And as an investor, if more people struggle and they don't want to kind of play in it, like we like that, because that becomes a good moat for us, that we can we can just kind of find good companies, right? Like around this idea.
It's a good competitive advantage, so long as it's until it becomes mainstream. That's good. Yeah.
And I think maybe it's very, when you're tackling some of these problems that Vishal is mentioning, those are some very risky projects and requires a big amount of effort and capital, some of them, to be solved. And then venture capital is kind of the riskiest investment form, and to direct capital towards these big problems is something very important. And if you have all the great ideas but not the capital, then these two have to work in tandem in order to be able to solve these problems. Mm-hmm. So I think it's maybe Vishal should get some more competition by more people, and I think that would be good.
Great. Okay, thank you both. I think we're already at an end. I think this topic is there's endless of potential to delve further and further into this space. But I really appreciate you sharing your insights so far. And to everyone of the listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed the talk and that we could bring you some inspiration and insights on the combination of profit and purpose. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Vishal and Lucas.